appears to be the beginning of the end of the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, as shameful as that is. I don't think it's coincidental, you know how I think, but it's after 40 days of wandering in the wilderness and making the American people suffer needlessly, some Senate Democrats finally have stepped forward to end the pain. It appears to us this morning that our long national nightmare is finally coming to an end, and we're grateful for that. At least some Democrats now finally appear ready to do what Republicans and President Trump and millions of hardworking American people have been asking them to do for weeks. But as we said from the beginning, the people's government cannot be held hostage to further anyone's political agenda. That was never right. And shutting down the government never produces anything. It never has, if you study history. And so here we are. I want to remind everybody this morning of another critical point that you've heard me here repeat over and over the last several weeks. It's something that I and Leader John Thune and President Trump and every Republican leader have all said repeatedly from the beginning. We have always been open to finding solutions to reduce the oppressive costs of health care under the Unaffordable Care Act. We just made clear that we would not and should not ever do that, that is, negotiate as hostages. And I've also reminded you here every morning at this press conference throughout the shutdown, Republicans have not just been talking about reducing costs and fraud and abuse in so many areas and in healthcare. We've been actually passing new laws to accomplish that urgent mission for the people, and we will continue to do so. So here's where we are by way of schedule, just so you know, you're following. And if you're not at home, if you're waking up to this good news this morning, the Senate's vote late last night of 60 to 40 opens the door now. The Senate is moving forward on an amended House CR, a continuing resolution, that will reopen the government until January 30th. Added to that are provisions to fully fund SNAP provisions through the end of the next fiscal year, which is September 2026, guaranteed back pay for all federal workers who have been made to endure these hardships over the last several weeks. And it also includes passage of 3 appropriations bills, which we're grateful to be moving through the process. That is the Military Construction Veterans Affairs bill, it's the Agriculture bill, and the Legislative Branch bill. The Senate will be back in session this morning to finish their job, and we're certainly praying that they do. They'll need unanimous consent from all senators to fast-track their final vote. As you know, there's some procedural hurdles that one or more could throw in the way, but we certainly hope that they won't do that because so many people across this country are desperate for the government to reopen. At the very moment that they do that final vote, I will call all House members to return to Washington as quickly as possible. We'll give a 36-hour formal and official notice so that we can vote as soon as possible to pass the amended CR bill and get it to the president's desk. As you all know, and he said as recently as last night, I was with him, and he told the press, he said, we want to get the government open. He's very anxious to get the government reopened and to end the Schumer shutdown. We all are. With regard to the travel challenges, I spoke yesterday at some length with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, my former colleague and good friend, and he lamented the serious situation that we have with air travel in the U.S. He's bent over backwards, as all members of the administration and the cabinet have done in all of their areas of jurisdiction, to try to keep the government working for the people and to mitigate the pain and the harm. But the problem we have with air travel is that our air traffic controllers are overworked and unpaid, and many of them have called in sick. That's a very stressful job, and even more stressful exponentially when they're having trouble providing for their families. And so air travel has been grinding to a halt in many places. And as of Sunday, nearly half of all domestic flights and U.S. flights were either canceled or delayed. And it's a very serious situation. So I'm saying that by way of reminder. I'm stating the obvious to all my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats in the House. You need to begin right now returning to the Hill. We have to do this as quickly as possible. Now, we look forward to the government reopening this week so Congress can get back to our regular legislative session. We have a lot of business to do, as you all know, and we will be working in earnest. There'll be long days and long nights here for the foreseeable future to make up for all this lost time that was imposed upon us. I want to close with something that's important. I think it's important to say that this is genuine. I mean this sincerely. We applaud the 7 Senate Democrats and 1 independent senator who did the right thing. They decided to put principle over their personal politics. And my urgent plea of all my colleagues in the House, and that means every Democrat in the House, is to think carefully, pray, and finally do the right thing and help us to bring an end to the pain of the American people. This has gone on too long. Too many people have suffered, and it's long overdue. That's the update I wanted to give you this morning. There are probably lots of questions, but I'm going to get a lot of my own questions answered later today, so stay tuned for more. Thanks so much.
All right, so there you have the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, making the statement. Important words, our long national nightmare, he says, finally coming to an end. It appears to be the end of the federal government shutdown, but there's still plenty of things that need to be done in the Senate and then the House of Representatives. So there's still plenty of work that needs to be done, but let's see how all this unfolds. Pamela.
Yeah, and you heard him say, giving credit to the 7 Democrats and the 1 independent. He said for putting principle over politics. We have one of them here with us. Joining us now is Independent Senator Angus King of Maine. He voted with Republicans to advance the deal to reopen the government. Thanks for being here with us. Sure. I just want to start with getting your reaction from what we just heard from Speaker Johnson.
Well, I don't know what to make of being complimented by Speaker Johnson. I don't know what that's going to do to my reputation, but I'll let that pass. Here's where we are and where we were and what got me to the point where I'm saying let's reopen. The strategy at the beginning of the shutdown on behalf of the Democrats was twofold. Stand up to Donald Trump and bring the Republicans to the table to negotiate an end to these drastic cuts to the ACA premiums, or actually drastic increases to the ACA premiums. The problem was after over 40 days, neither of those goals was being accomplished. And in the meantime, a lot of collateral damage was happening. People's lives were being hurt. We've heard you talk about air travel, but I'm more worried about 42 million Americans who depend on SNAP benefits to put food in before their families. That's what was suffering. And so the question I was wrestling with is, if the tactic isn't working, and there were no prospects that it was going to work, then let's move on, not make a lot of other people suffer in order to get a goal that wasn't attainable. What we did get in this agreement was, the Speaker mentioned, there are 3 appropriations bills. That wasn't in the original discussion. One of them is agriculture. When that passes in this part of this agreement, SNAP is safe until next year, until next fall. And there are a lot of other benefits that are in those bills. Secondly, for the first time in my experience, the majority leader has agreed to put a bill on the floor drafted by the Democrats on this health care and ACA issue. And historically, that doesn't happen. The majority leader decides what comes to the floor. Now, is that bill going to pass? What are the prospects? 50%, 25%? But the point I want to make is, as of yesterday morning, when the shutdown was still going, the chances were 0 of getting anything on the ACA.
So your projection is that the separate ACA vote has a 50% to 25% chance of passing?
It's some measurable percentage, which is a lot more than 0.
So then what do you say to the Democrats who argue this deal is a terrible mistake, it's an empty promise or even a betrayal, especially after the recent election where you saw Democrats have big wins? Why exactly, in your view, are they wrong on that?
Because they don't tell us how it ends. Are we going to stay in the shutdown for another month through Thanksgiving into Christmas? There's no end game. And people are going to feel the same way they do 2 weeks from now or a month from now, only a lot of Americans are going to suffer in the meantime. So if they had a plan, if the Democrats said, okay, here's what's going to happen on this, and this, there's no such thing as just continue the shutdown and hope that the Republicans come to the table, which we know they won't. We've learned that. And there's no evidence that they're going to come back in a week or in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And in the meantime, we're hurting a lot of people. If this was just a debate between politicians in the Senate about, we're here for the weekend and we want to get it over with, that'd be one thing. But people are being damaged by virtue of the continuation of the shutdown that's not getting us anywhere. A good general, if the battle plan isn't working, you change the battle plan, you try another tactic, especially if what's happening is danger to your troops. And that's what we're talking about, is danger to the American people. in the service of a strategy that isn't working and has no prospects of working.
So then do you think the Democrats who voted against this deal caved?
Who voted against it? Well, no, they were saying, no, we want to keep going, we want to keep fighting. And my problem is that...
I'm sorry, the Democrats who voted for it, did they cave?
No.
Because they had been holding out, and they had been holding out for the reasons that you laid out, and then they voted for it.
And then, but what happened was people like Jeanne Shaheen and Maggie Hassan, who had voted no all the way along, said, you know, we're not getting anywhere. I mean, that's the basic point. We've been at this at the longest shutdown in American history, and neither of the goals that were originally set forth at the beginning of this have been achieved or will be achieved. And I checked in, you know, with some of my Republican colleagues this morning. I said, what are the chances if the shutdown goes on for another 2 or 3 weeks or a month that you guys are going to come and negotiate a deal on the ACA? He said 0. And that's where we are.